Very good afternoon to all of you. The weather is good to learn about some dynamic equipment, and we are going to discuss today on OCT, which is one of the most dynamic diagnostic equipment that ophthalmic surgeons use. It has wide range of applications, starting from its the tear film to the optic nerve evaluation. I'll just share my slides and start off. So our discussion today will be OCT, its relevance in ophthalmic diagnosis and management. We have 5 eminent speakers. To begin with, it will be Dr. Ashok Kumar Nanda, who is me. I am working at Bhubaneswar Car Vision Eye Hospital. I will be speaking on relevance of OCT to anterior segment clinicians. Dr. Shashmita is a glaucoma specialist, and she would be speaking on OCT, its role in glaucoma diagnosis and treatment. Dr. G.N. Rao is a retina specialist, again from Bhubaneswar, who is director of Vision Care Center for Retina. He would be speaking on relevance of various layers of retina in OCT. Dr. Sangamitra Kanungo is a retina specialist from Bhubaneswar Car Vision Eye Hospital. She would be talking on retinal pathologies, diagnosis and treatment made easy with OCT. Dr. Deepak Agarwal is from Patna. He is the director of Harihar
Eye Care.
Harihar Eye Care, I'm sorry, who has been practicing retina for probably about 15 years, and he would be highlighting OCT angio versus FFA. Before we actually begin, I'll probably take a couple of minutes letting all of you know about a brief history of OCT. OCT was first prototype was started in 1989 in the laboratory of Dr. James Fujimoto by Dr. Huang and Schumann, and the data was published in 1991. Subsequently, the doctors formed a company called Advanced Ophthalmic Diagnostics, and in 1994, they patented the technology and subsequently transferred it to Carl Zeiss Meditech. The first commercial available OCT was OCT 1000, which was marketed in 1996. The second generation was OCT 2000, introduced in 2000. The third generation OCT, which was called OCT 3 or the Stratus OCT or time domain OCT, was introduced in 2002. The first advanced OCT, known as the Cirrus OCT, which is a Fourier domain OCT or a spectral domain OCT, was commercially available in 2006. Swept source OCT was introduced by Topcon in 2013, and OCT angio, the principles were described way back in 2006 by Dr. Matika et al. Subsequently, the principles were further modified by Dr. Jia et al. In 2012, and it was Optos which introduced the first commercially available angio OCT in 2016. So having said that, we'll go ahead with the first topic. Modern medicine is not just clinical expertise. It is a combination of clinical expertise with patient values and evidence-based practice. And the OCT is an imaging modality which is instrumental adjunct to the clinical examination of diagnosis and treatment of several ocular pathologies. I will be discussing the role of anterior segment OCT in cornea and ocular surface, its role in refractive surgery, its role in glaucoma and cataract surgery. We all know OCT is a real-time in situ high resolution cross-sectional image in microns, and resolution varies from 3 to 15 microns. It's a non-contact technique. The posterior segment OCT was started way back in 1991, as Aizaz said, and the anterior segment in 1994. These were the quality of image at time, and these are the quality of image at present. The resolution has made the micro architecture of the tissue to be visible, and it helps in clearer understanding of the pathological process. We all know about the principle of OCT. It is based on Michelson's interferometry. The reflected light from different layers form constructive interference once they gel with the light from the reference mirror, and these constructive interference produce multiple A scans, and these A scans then are amalgamated to form B scans to give the OCT scan. As the OCT transformed from time domain to spectral domain and later to swept source OCT, it has allowed for faster scan speed, greater tissue penetration, and higher axial resolution. There are certain dedicated anti-segment OCTs from Carl Zeiss, Heidelberg, and Tommy, but most of the other OCTs can be converted to an anti-segment OCT by attaching an anti-segment module to give the imaging from the anti-segment. There are various scan protocols. I don't think it is necessary to continue that. We'll discuss about anti-segment OCT role in cornea and ocular surface. It starts with tear film imaging to the diagnosis of surface neoplasm. We'll go one by one briefly. Ocular surface dysfunction can be known by assessing the tear volume and tear meniscus height. In addition to that, anti-segment OCT can also give the corneal and conjunctival epithelial thickness. In the corneal scar, it will give us the depth of corneal opacity. That will help the surgeons to determine what is the optical procedures to be done, whether it is a full thickness or a partial thickness graft. Its application in corneal degeneration has also been proven. In keratoconus, a pachymetric map can provide certain diagnostic criteria for diagnosis of keratoconus. Superior-inferior thickness difference if it is more than 45 microns, if the minimum thickness is less than 470 microns, and the thickness difference between the maximum and the minimum is more than 100 microns, that is diagnosis of keratoconus. Certain high-resolution anti-segment OCTs can give epithelial mapping, and epithelial mapping can be precursor for certain marginal degenerations like pellucid marginal degeneration and keratoconus. In all types of corneal dystrophy, anti-segment OCT helps in telling the depth of the lesion and therefore helps in planning the treatment. This is epithelial basement membrane dystrophy where you can see the lesion limited to the basement membrane. These are the granular dystrophies, and now this is a macular dystrophy. This is a lattice dystrophy. So all these can tell us about the extent and depth of the lesions. In endothelial dystrophies, also in Fuchs, you can get nodules in the endothelium, and also here you can see there are subepithelial fluid present. In an advanced case of Fuchs, you can see stromal edema with water clefts in the stroma, and the whole of endothelium appears to be granular. Other corneal disorders where it is playing a role is to find out stromal edema in hydrops, in bullous keratopathy, the status of the endothelium, in corneal scar to know the condition of the antersegment, whether there are iris adhesions to the scar or not, or if there is a retrocorneal membrane. The antersegment OCT in infectious keratitis also helps in telling or delineating the depth of the infection, how much is the stromal thinning, whether there is a corneal abscess or not, and if the limbus is involved or not. In keratoplasty, the OCT can help us in planning the surgery, and during surgery, it gives us the depth of trephination and the presence of any retained Descemet's membrane. And after surgery, it will tell us the broad host and graft junction. If we have access to an intraoperative OCT, the Descemet membrane can be visualized, and whether the graft is in place or not can be known. At the end of the surgery, interface fluid can be seen, and graft centration also can be detected. In a case of early postoperative period, if the cornea is edematous, it can tell us whether the graft is detached. If the graft ends, the Descemet's membrane ends are rolled up or not. In later cases also, it will give us a complete demarcation of the graft host junction and corneal thickness. In post-cataract scenario, if the cornea is edematous, it can tell us about retinal detachment of the Descemet's membrane and accordingly help us in planning treatment. In trauma, it can localize foreign bodies in what depth the foreign bodies are there. In addition, it can also give idea about subluxation of the lens. Refractive surgery, there are OCTs are now being utilized experimentally to give us the topographical data, but as of now, it is being used for post-operative assessment and to evaluate the complications, especially to give the regularity of the epithelium in PRK, LASIK flap evaluation, to know about the stria and displacement in DLK, and to look into the interface corneal edema. At times, we need to know about the residual stromal thickness for re-LASIK, and intersegment OCT plays a role in that. Epithelial ingrowths and retained lenticulae in SMILE can also be delineated. In other corneal surgeries like collagen cross-linking, the intersegment OCT helps in evaluating the effect of the treatment, that is the cross-linking, at what depth it has been effected by knowing about the demarcation line. In Intacs, not only it will help us in knowing at what depth the Intacs is present, but it also helps to evaluate the changes, the geometric changes of the cornea after the Intac is implanted. In the ocular surface neoplasm, in OSSN, which is a epithelial neoplasm, you can have the tumor in the epithelium. It appears to be hyperreflective, and the epithelium is thickened. And after the neoplasm is healed, you can see in the lower part, the epithelium has become normal. To differentiate a melanoma, you can see it is also hyperreflective, but it is subepithelial. Epithelium is intact here. Similarly, in lymphoma, the mass is hyperreflective. It is also subepithelial. And in a conjunctival nevus, there are multiple cystic spaces in the mass, in the tumor. In cataract surgery, it helps in evaluating the grade of cataract. In traumatic and scarred cornea, also it will tell about the nature of cataract. It helps to know whether there is a pre-existing posterior capsular rupture in a posterolateral cataract. In evaluation for biometry, it gives almost all intersegment parameters which are necessary for being utilized in 4th and 5th generation formally for IOL power calculation. A real-time intersegment OCT is necessary for planning treatment in femtolaser assisted cataract surgery, and that helps in not only giving us the incision details, the lumbar relaxing incision details, but also about nucleotomy and capsular incisions. We can also have fair idea about IOL tilt and lens tilt by limbus to limbus intersegment OCT evaluation. In the phakic IOL implantation, it is important to know the vault, because there should be at least 250 microns space between the phakic IOL and the lens to prevent early cataract formation. In glaucoma, there are various implications of intersegment OCT because it gives a very clear picture of the angle structures. It can tell us about the patency of PI and bleb condition. In this, you can see after the PI, the antechamber, which was shallow, has deepened. This is the clinical picture. The antechamber had a peripheral anterior synechiae. After the PI, it has deepened. The PI is seen here. And here, the PI appears to be normal, but on intersegment OCT, you can still see a thin membrane behind. It also plays a role in knowing angle recession. This is a break in the angle in the trabecular meshwork. It has a role in diagnosis of iridodialysis and cyclodialysis. And the newer OCT machines can give us idea about 12 clock hours angle structure, which can also be depicted in a graph. So to summarize, I would say that intersegment OCT is a non-invasive optical tool for in vivo assessment of the intersegment, giving accurate optical biopsies and helping in diagnosis and treatment of various ophthalmic diseases. Thank you. So with this, I invite Dr. Susmita to discuss about the role of OCT in glaucoma. We'll take up all the questions later on at the end of the session.
Thank you, sir. So I will be talking about the role of OCT in diagnosis and treatment of glaucoma. So as we know, the glaucoma is a neurodegenerative disease and which has several risk factors of raised IOP with raised CD ratio, increasing age, family history, and all leads to the apoptotic process and finally ganglion cell death and axonal loss. So 40% of the ganglion cell death occurs before there is some structural changes in the optic nerve head. Once the optic nerve head changes appears, there is some manifestation in the perimetry and it appears in the fields in form of scotoma. So we need to diagnose the glaucoma pre-perimetrically rather than at the stage of visual field when the already 40% loss of axons has happened. So pre-perimetric evaluation of glaucoma, early glaucoma is the key factor in the glaucoma screening and diagnosis. So as we know, the structural damage may precede the functional loss, and RNFL defects or the ganglion cell defects are the earliest signs of glaucoma, and these damage occurs earlier than ONH damage and visual fields. OCT as a technology and a machine is important for the RNFL measurement. It is a real-time, immediate, objective, and quantitative assessment of RNFL, detects the focal NFL defects and localized regions of NFL attenuation. So sir has gone very in detail about the generations of OCT. I'm not going in detail. I'll be directly going to spectral OCT. We'll be discussing about the spectral OCT. Commercially available are Zeiss, Cirrus HD, Heidelberg Spectralis, Optavia, and Topcon. So we'll be discussing about Cirrus HD and Spectralis. So spectral domain OCT, the main advantage in the diagnosis of glaucoma is increased axial resolution, faster scanning speed, 3D image acquisition, reproducible images, advanced segmentation, and improved progression detection. So type of scans in Cirrus HD OCT are three types of scans: optic nerve head scan, RNFL analysis, and macular ganglion cell analysis. In optic nerve head scan, there are various parameters which are studied. There are disc area, vertical horizontal cup ratios, and RNFL symmetry, rim areas. And RNFL analysis have the TSNIT graph is symmetry, sectoral charts, and clockwise charts. Macular ganglion cell analysis is the newer one, in which the different machines, they segment the macula differently. Some machines segment it in GCL and IPL layer, as in Cirrus HD OCT. In Spectralis, the whole of the macula is screened. So this is what somewhere Cirrus OCT printout looks like. This is the first topmost area is the patient details, which is very important, where you have to enter the patient's age correctly. Otherwise, inappropriate age will lead to comparison with the wrong normative data for the same age. Second is the image quality, 0 to 10 is the normal, somewhere more than 6 is acceptable. So I'll be going in detail about each zones. So the key parameters which are studied, analyzed in Cirrus HD OCT is average thickness, RNFL symmetry, rim area, average CD ratio, vertical CD ratio, and volume. So the first box shows that everything is in normal range and it is in the green zone. Whereas the second box, you can see the red zone where the RNFL thinning is around 50 microns. In the third box, it is in the gray zone. Many parameters are in the gray zone because they are outside the normative data range. Now, second is the RNFL thickness and deviation map. The top portions are the RNFL thickness, where you can see the color-coded maps in the yellow and red zone, which shows that RNFL is quite thickened and normal. Whereas the last two boxes you can see in the blue zone, where the color coding and hourglass pattern has lost. So this is RNFL thinning in cases of glaucoma. The lower boxes is the RNFL deviation map, whereas the measurement circle is around the ONH, where you have to see whether the circle is being properly placed or not, if this or properly centered or not. If it is shifted towards the right or left, it will show some temporal thinning or temporal thickening in the RNFL. And also the circumpapillary, the color-coded RNFL zones are seen. If you have missed clinically very small focal areas, it can be picked up here. So this is the lowermost portion where NRR and RNFL thickness. This graph, the top one shows the NRR thickening, and the lower one, which shows the RNFL thickness, is in the hourglass pattern. So the dotted lines and those continuous lines have is for the right and left eyes, and you have to see whether these lines are in the green zone, yellow zone, or the red zone. Similarly, they are depicted in a sectoral method in quadrant and clockwise quadrant method, in clockwise sectoral method. So these are the B-scan images just to know whether there is demarcation lines are properly placed and segmentation lines are there, are correct or not. So coming to macular thickness and glaucoma, macular thickness and NFL thickness is significantly reduced in glaucoma and and important for early diagnosis in glaucoma, but it has a moderate sensitivity and specificity, and diagnosis in early glaucoma is limited. Why? Because you need to have a normal macula to pick up the glaucoma. If the patient has diabetic retinopathy or some edema or macular degenerations, in those cases, if these values have no, it's limited. So this is the macular analysis. The first scan shows the macular analysis of serous HD OCT, where in the upper case, you can see the GCL and IPL thickness map. The middle one shows the deviation map and the sectoral thickness of ganglion cell thickness sector wise. And in the right side, we have a spectralis macular analysis, which is in the grid pattern, in which whole of the macula is screened. The upper and lower portion of the macular thickness is compared, and each of the grid is also compared, and it is depicted in a grayscale zone. So we have progression analysis. This is a serous HD-OCT's progression analysis, where the two baseline examinations are needed to compare with the rest of the follow-up scans. And you have a parametric table given, which is done for analysis. And the color coding is given at the end to know whether there is some kind of progression or not. This progression analysis in serous HD-OCT is capable of giving both event and analysis, both trend analysis and event analysis. Whereas in GP or Spectralis, it gives only event analysis, and you need only one baseline scan, and it is compared to the pointwise with the next all the follow-up scans. So you have a macular analysis and you have an NFL analysis. Subsequently, you have to just compare with the next scan, baseline scan, how much decrease in the macular thickness is there, or how much decrease in the NFL thickness is there. So coming to the correlation between the OCT and other investigative modalities in diagnosis and treatment, first the indication where do we need OCT in glaucoma. So basically in early glaucoma, suspect cases, family history of glaucoma, ocular hypertensives. If the patient is too sick to sit for period, detect early glaucoma in other eye, advanced glaucomas, and progression. So this is the first case of IOP in the right eye is 26, left eye is 30. Left with the right eye is 0.6 cup disc ratio and weak cups. Left eye is 0.6 cup disc ratio with superior thinning. So this is a spectralis scan of the right eye showing the normal RNFL. Whereas in the left eye, you can see the RNFL thinning, superior focal RNFL thinning is also there, and the macular scan also shows the grayscale, some kind of scotomas. And the corresponding perimetry in the right eye is normal, where the left eye shows the inferior scotomas, and this patient has been put on medications. This is a second patient with disc photograph showing 0.7 cup disc ratio of inferior notch and a wide NFLD, and corresponding superior arcuate defect is shown in the perimetry. And this is a Stratus OCT scan showing the inferior RNFL thinning. Another patient with the disc photo of 0.8 cup disc ratio with bipolar notch and a wedge defects both sides, and advanced field loss in perimetry, and a Stratus OCT scan showing the 3-quadrant loss of RNFL. This is again a 52-year-old female whose right eye IOP is 26 with maximum medical therapy, with left eye 20 with 2 drugs, and CDR is 0.8 in the right eye, and left eye is 0.5 cup disc ratio. Now you can see the right eye is totally advanced, but we have not done the scan to know anything about the right eye. It is basically, this patient has gone for trap in the right eye, but left eye, which appears to be normal clinically, so pick up the early damage in the OCT. So we have done for the left eye, and we can see the focal changes in the upper part. And OCT is basically has a limited value in advanced glaucomas because it has a floor effect. After a certain value, it levels off before below 50 and 40 microns, it doesn't show. So you have to follow up these patients, advanced glaucoma patients, with the perimetry. So this is another patient of myopia who has a large disc and large cup. It's a large cup disc ratio, but fields is normal. And all you can see in Cirrus HD OCT scan is the RNFL thinning. So we know that myopic patients doesn't have the normative data in OCT. And definitely with the increase in axial length, the RNFL thinning is there. And so OCT will definitely show all the red zones like a red disease, but you have to follow up the patient. You have to know the risk factors of this patient. If you have a family history of glaucoma, if there's an increased raised IOP, and then only decide to treat the patient or not to treat the patient. This is a patient who has an age of 12 years, and it has a cup disc asymmetry, and OCT is done. So you can see everything is in white zone because we don't have any normative data in this age group. So to conclude, OCT has made a remarkable journey and can be incorporated judiciously in the clinical practice of glaucoma management. If combined with comprehensive eye examination and careful glaucoma assessment, technology use may even be more valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sasmita. That was very comprehensive, and you rightly said that the role of OCT is very, very important in pre-perimetric glaucoma. And also you have very nicely highlighted what are the fallacies where you would probably not take OCT report as very valid finding, and how OCT helps in progression. So next we'll go to our third talk. I now request Dr. G. Nageswar Rao to speak on relevance of various layers of retina in OCT. Dr. Nageswar Rao.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to even the AOS Scientific Committee and Dr. Ashok Nanda for giving me this opportunity to speak on OCT, the normal retinal anatomy. The hats off to the development of OCT, the technology which has changed for the last 2 or 3 decades. The introduction of OCT has really changed a lot of things in the diagnosis. Actually, the subtle changes in the disease process we are able to diagnose, not only in the field of ophthalmology. It has actually wide range of application in even cardiothoracic or the vascular system, and even GI system, everywhere. Actually, it has changed a lot in the diagnosis and picking up the subtle changes. It's a very good tool, and in fact, prior just Dr. Sasmita and Dr. Ashok Nanda, they said so many changes that we are now picking up in the what we are not able to pick up clinically, or with the so many equipments which are available prior to that. The OCT has actually really changed a lot of revolution in the field of ophthalmology. So coming to the retinal changes, so it's before discussing what the changes in the retina will get, let me just tell, or we'll just discuss we'll put a glimpse on what is the retinal anatomy, normal anatomy. This is the cartoon. This is the pictorial depiction of. It's a nice picture. Is given the background. We are seeing OCT, the picture, the layers of the OCT, and nicely designed the cellular this one connections of the retina, as well as the layers which are written here. So without inverts, what we'll see, retinal pigment epithelium. This is the bright zone which is corresponding to the retinal pigment epithelium, and after that the photoreceptor which are adjoining the RP, the photoreceptor layer, and external membrane, the cellular layer which is outer nuclear layer, outer plexiform which is connected to the inner nuclear layer, bipolar cell layer, and the plexiform, inner plexiform layer, ganglion cells, retinal nerve fibers, and interlimiting membrane. So this is the normal anatomy. So now with the OCT, we are able to see the particular cellular level changes. This is very amazing. So this is in 2014, the panel of experts, they have clarified regarding the outer retinal layers, which are earlier to that, we were speaking about the three outer layers, that is external limiting membrane and the photoreceptor layer and the retinal pigment epithelium. But this panel, experts of panels, they've actually clarified the photoreceptor layer is actually two practically. The outer one, the photoreceptor layer, which is called the interdigitation zone, or the zone of Vera, or the layer of Verhoeven, or the cost, we can tell, cone outer segment tips. And in the internal to that, that is the ISOS junction, it is called. This is the four layers, which are earlier we used to tell it as three layers with the status, OCT and all. And the basic principle in the OCT imaging of the diagnosis, what is, we read out the OCT by looking into the scan, whether it is weakly reflective or highly reflective. Usually the cellular layers, they are weakly reflective. They appear as dark zones, and the highly reflective layer, which appears as bright zones. So what is normal OCT? Normal OCT look like this. This is a bell-shaped, actually centrally bell-shaped, which is corresponding to the umbo, or the central pit of the fovea, which is here it is. And around 60 to 80% cases, we may see sometimes the foveal bulge. This is also normal. And sometimes the vascular, this mostly you will see the vessels which are there in the interlimiting inner nuclear layer and the nerve fiber layer, they cast the shadow. This is the shadow which is casting. This is the normal vascular. So normal OCT scan, and this is any abnormality in the OCT normal, we will find so much, suppose bulge, there will be increase in thickness or the cystic deformation, whatever it is, the changes we will see, that is abnormal. So let's discuss by layer. The vitreous, normally we see vitreous is clear, crystal clear, because of around 98% of its water content. Because of the water content, it appears black. So any opacity in the vitreous which is picked by the OCT, or that appears as white reflective dots. I will be showing these reflective dots. For example, astrodialysis, it is there. So many dots we are seeing, astrodialysis, they appear as in the vitreous, there will be homogeneously reflective dots you will see in the OCT vitreous cavity. Suppose inflammatory cells will be looking like this. Sometimes the membranes will also be seen, but this is a normal postvitreous detachment. And in fact, the hemorrhage, suppose it's pre-retinal or the vitreous hemorrhage, which casts a shadow in the retina with a hyperreflective zone or hyperreflective layer sort of thing. And the postvitreous cortex, they appear. Suppose if the PVD is complete or no PVD, then you will find you see like this. But something like here, it is incomplete PVD. That means somewhere it is attached at the perifoveal region. Okay. And here also it's incomplete PVD. And vitreomacular interface, as I said, macular interface, that means sometimes you will find this is a normal, it looks a normal, and nothing it's a change is there, or usually patients come with a very good vision. There is an incomplete PVD, but there is a perifoveal attachment of the vitreous here. So around a 3 millimeter zone of attachment will be there, the vitreous will be attached without any change in the foveal architecture. That is vitreomacular adhesion, it is called. Normally, you won't find any problem. There is a OCT diagnostic entity. Usually the patients, they don't come with any metamorphopsia or any problem, but here it is traction. Suppose this is called vitreomacular traction. That means there will be some change with the traction at the fovea. There will be disorganization, or the layers will be deranged. So there will be pull in the foveal zone. So this is vitreomacular traction, and this is ERM. You can see a hyperreflective layer which is there here, and it's just tinting the fovea or deform the normal foveal pit. This is called ERM. And this is, sometimes you will see in high myopic eyes, pathological myopia, you may find that there is a split in the nerve fiber layer, that is called macular schisis. You will see schisis cavities will be there. Here in macular hole, even macular holes, although gas is Donald Gass has classified macular holes prominently, and we are following till now. But OCT, after the the OCT came into the picture, we are actually classifying based on the OCT. This is the spontaneous separation. The grade, suppose it's a early macular hole, stage 0. We call it as stage 0 because there will be a vitromacular area, the adhesion area, attachment here. There are some changes, subtle changes you will find. There will be a deformation of the foveal, inner foveal contour will be changed. So this is grade 0, and grade 1, here it is grade 1. Some cystic changes will be there. Sorry, 60 changes will be there here with the vitromacular vitrofoveal attachment. So this is called clinically we call it we see it as yellow spot like thing, and because of the cyst in the fovea, and when the neurosensory detachment occurs, a ring sort of detachment occurs here clinically, then we'll see a yellow ring. Then stage 2, eccentric holes will be there with a some flap of attachment, or it looks like a tear sort of thing, flap tear sort of thing, very subtle, that is less than 200 micron size. This is stage 2. And stage 3, more than 200 size hole, full thickness macular hole will be there, and the vitreous may usually remains at somewhere incomplete PVD there. If it's complete PVD, then it's called grade 4. So what is abnormal? So abnormal structure in the OCT, change in the reflectivity maybe, or increase in thickness, or decrease in thickness, or loss of thickness, or abnormal deposits. We'll read like this. So characteristics of reflectivity is either it may be hyperreflectivity or hyperreflectivity. Hyperreflectivity, we'll see somewhere the cystic spaces will be there. Fluid accumulation, whether diffuse or cystic, you will find this hyperreflectivity, where it appears as a dark zone. Here it is hyperreflectivity. You are seeing so many hyperreflective structures here. They are all hyperreflective. They appear as bright. So reflectivity, based on the reflectivity, and transmission. Transmission defects, like suppose it's decreased transmission, like the light, it's actually some barrier is obstructing the transmission of light into the retina. So this is, for example, a blood may be there, some exudates may be there. They are blocking the pathway to light reaching the retina. This is decreased transmission. And increased transmission, for example, macular hole is there, so light, nothing tissue is there here directly, that is scanning the choroid here, underlying the choroid, the RP. So this is, here you will find the hyperreflective, increased transmission. Evaluate foveal, how to evaluate foveal profile. So normal foveal profile is a slight depression in the surface of the retina, described as a smooth inverted bell curve. This is it, and abnormally the contour is altered. So cortical within the between cortical vitreous and the NFL, nerve fiber layer, usually this is normal, and here you will find a, suppose ERM is there, then it appears as like this, and that is called ectopic inner foveal layer. That's EFIL. That means the foveal contour is little bit of changed. This is, and nerve fiber layer, sometimes you will find normally you will find the thickened nerve fiber layer towards the disc, nasal, towards the side of the nasal, the retinal nerve fiber will be thickened here normally. But there will be a loss sometimes. What Susmita was telling, even nowadays, OCT is defining whether there is a really quantifiable amount of nerve fiber thickness is lost or not, or ganglion cell loss is also nowadays we are detecting that. And NFL thickness you will find in sometimes in astrocytoma or the corneal spots.
Sorry, sir, for interrupting. Can we look
NFL
to
thickness
finish up in next 30 seconds?
So inner layer defects is prominently we will see in particular in lamellar macular holes. You will find inner layer that the intact of the outer layers, and inner retinal disorganization is the OCT is actually defining disorganization of the inner retinal layers. That is called DRIL, which is prominently nowadays, which is the important biomarker of diagnosing the diabetic macular edema. So in that case, we're actually taking into account so many things in the inner retinal. They are actually where there or not. Suppose the inner retinal layers are disorganized in comparison to the normal, then the prognosis becomes grim. And inner retinal hyperreflectivity, Again, sometimes we will see in acute, suppose a case of CRAO comes, whether it is acute or chronic. Suppose in acute cases, what happens because of the cloudy thickening of the inner retina, there will be thickened inner retina up to the OPL, outer plexiform layer. So there will be a membrane-like, a continuous membrane-like structure you will find in the close to the outer plexiform layer. That is called middle limiting membrane. It's named as middle limiting membrane, which is a diagnostic of OCT diagnosis of acute CRAO. And sometimes in the spectrum of white dot syndrome, you will find so many things have come into, because these cases, ideally we are not able to pick it up or diagnose or define. Now the OCT, you're defining all this because of the, depending on the which layer is affected. Now the things are coming to the picture, whether it is a paracentral acute middle maculopathy. This is the new disease entity which is coming. So many issues are coming based on the OCT. And inner retinal hyperreflectivity, again, because of, suppose normal in hard exudates, if they're in the retina, they appear, if the more than, they are usually more than 50 micron hard exudates, pigments or inflammatory cells in the retina. And the lesser size nowadays, so we are defining hyperreflective foci. They are there in the, you will see particularly in the diabetic macular edema patients, because of the long-standing diabetic macular edema, you will see there will be some changes in the hyperreflective foci. They are less than 50 micron size, and they will respond to steroids. In that cases, may not be anti-VEGF, may not be effective. You have to combine with steroids, or you can go with steroid alone. So inner retinal hyperreflectivity, again, as I said earlier, hyperreflectivity because of any accumulation of fluid. So there will be cystic spaces which tells the hyperreflectivity in the retinal layers, or that will be seen in many cases like retinoschisis, RP with CME, so many.
Sorry,
And
sir, for
outer retinal
interrupting,
loss,
but
outer retinal loss is important parameter become in so many disease entities, like particularly in diabetic macular edema, long-standing diabetic macular edema, or the vasculopathies, retinal vasculopathies, or in age-related changes, many. So outer retinal changes, like particularly we define or do we see or read this external membrane onwards, what are the changes, like whether any change in the external ELM or the change in the ISO junction or the cost or RP, whatever, wherever the changes will be there. Suppose some changes are there, some disruption in the layers there, that means that one should not, even the prognosis becomes very bad. Keep on injecting the anti-VEGFs may not be working. And here outer retinal changes, like for example, tubulations will come, outer tubulations. Sometimes they mimic as cystic spaces, but they are actually, these are all outer retinal tubulations. They are all important biomarkers which come into play. They are called, it is called disorganized outer retinal layers. So these tubulations are centrally hyperreflectivity and surrounded by a circular hyperreflective zone. So these are different from the cystic. They are uniformly there. You will find the hyperreflectivity, but here is central hypo surrounded by the hyperreflectivity. Importantly, one has to differentiate. Otherwise, you may be injecting the treating the patients with so many injections, they may not be responding. Subretinal hyperreflectivity. So this is because of
we need to finish it
vitelliform
up.
deposits, maybe it will be hyperreflective, or fibrin in case of inflammatory diseases, or the CSR, you will find fibrin subretinally, and the hemorrhages will look like this, very bright, homogeneous hyperreflective subretinally. These are all. And subretinal hyperreflectivity may be seen in CSR or neurosensory attachment, or the sensor neuro, this one, serous retinal attachment or neurosensory attachment, you will find like this. And RP Brooks Milburn complex, you will find like particularly, suppose there's a series, so many types of PEDs are there. Actually, this is a PED where you will find homogeneously there will be hyporeflectivity, that is the serous PED. If it is heterogeneous or combining this one heterogeneous reflectivity you are finding here, this is more in favor of fibrosing PED. And again here, very brightly homogeneously bright reflectivity subretinal you are finding, that is more in favor of hemorrhagic PED. So in doubtful situations, that will give a serous PED, maybe benign fibrovascular or hemorrhagic PED, which is more dangerous. We have to treat. So RP Bruce complex, you will sometimes, this is subtle changes you will find in the RP layer. There will be a splitting of the RP double layer sign, we call it as, that is the early neovascular biomarker, which OCT tells. So these are all the changes you will see in the retinal layers. Thank you very much. And especially I thank to Dr. Muralidhar, S.T. Muralidhar, who has shared his beautiful slides to me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. G.N. Rao. As we saw that the new high resolution OCTs have started giving in vivo micro architecture of tissue. So the retina can be seen in detail up to a level of tissues, including the RPE cells or even the photoreceptors. Now we have our fourth talk by Dr. Sanghamitra Kanungo. She will be talking on retinal pathologies, diagnosis and treatment made easy.
Thank you, sir. Can you see my slide and hear me?
Time to
Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear.
Okay. Okay. OCT retinal pathology. Can the other speakers please mute? Can the other speakers please mute?
Yes, ma'am, I'll just make sure.
Yeah. OCT retinal pathology diagnosis and treatment made easy.
Sanghamitra, you are not audible to me. I do not know. Is she audible to you?
Yes, she is audible.
Yes, she is audible to.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, OCT retinal pathology diagnosis and treatment made easy. So now I joined the meeting late. So what I heard from Dr. Rao, I think most of the slides have been covered. So for an introduction, the retinal evaluation technology has radically changed over the period of time. OCT is just an optical analog of ultrasound that uses low coherence interferometry to produce cross-sectional images of the retina. What we essentially get is a virtual biopsy. So this you can see that all the 10 layers of the retina can be easily made out. The common retinal scans that we use are the radial scans. It is about 6 to 12 scans at an equal angle from a common point, usually centered at the macula. This is the most common scan used. It takes a lesser amount of time. The raster scan can be of a 5 or a 7 line raster. They are serial parallel lines oriented at any angle over the lesion, and they define the lesion properly. They are of high resolution. A 3D scan are a number of horizontal line scans of a square box of 6 into 6 or 12 into 12. A 3D view implementation of advanced complex analysis, topographic mapping, or a cystic volume analysis can be done with this. What we need to know in OCT is a hyperreflective and a hyporeflective zone. There are 3 hyporeflective zones, so the rest are hyperreflective in a normal OCT. The ONL, the nerve fiber layer, outer nerve fiber, ganglion cell layer, and the inner nerve fiber layer are the hyporeflective zone. The rest are hyper. The areas of interest when we do a retinal OCT is the pre-retina, epiretinal membrane, intraretina, and the subretinal membrane. The indications are vitreomacular interface, where we try to see a vitreomacular traction, ERM or a macular hole. In vascular disorders, in diabetic retinopathies, the RVOs and the CRVO and CRAOs. We might sometimes use it in a subtle case of a subclinical RD, CSR, age-related macular degeneration, and in high myopic, where the contrast is very less. The VMA is defined as the partial separation of the vitreous in the perifoveal area without any abnormalities in the retinal contour. Usually these patients are symptomatic, might resolve on its own. The International Vitreoretinal Traction Society has classified the size of the adhesion according to the OCT as being focal less than a disc diameter as 1500 and broad as more than 1500 microns. The VMT may be of different type. It may be just a focal VMT like this for producing a cyst, a huge with a retinal detachment type, and a tenting type of a VMT. The VMT OCT classification are a V sepet where it's attached to the central macula, or a J sepet where it's attached to the optic nerve head, or a broad based. Now this was one of our patients with tented VMT. where the patient complained of gross metamorphosia with a visual acuity of 6/12, underwent a vitrectomy and his vision improved to 6/9. So with this, we can explain to the patient about his condition and later follow up the patient and show him, and to our satisfaction, how successful we are with our surgery. The others are the ERM, a lamellar hole. We can differentiate between these, a lamellar hole and a macular full thickness macular hole. The International Vitreoretinal Traction Society again classified vitreomacular adhesion, traction, and macular hole from stage 0 to stage 4, starting from a VMA to a small and a large full thickness macular hole with or without a VMT. This has already been covered by my previous speaker, the macular hole modified gas classification from stage 0 to stage 4, where a yellow spot is seen to a full thickness macular hole with total PVD, as you can see in this case. It is of quite important in macular holes, like staging of the macular hole, confirmation of the diagnosis. Sometimes the hole may be very small. In differentiating from a pseudo hole, educating the patient, when you show the patient, probably he comes to know that yes, there is a macular hole, there is a separation in between the layers, and you need not explain much about the surgery and all. It's helpful in prognosticating the surgical outcome. You can follow up your patient post-surgery. How is it helpful in prognosticating? If the hole form factor is more than 0.9, the hole usually closes in a single surgery. If it's less than 0.5, then 67% anatomical success rate is safe. So this was again one of my case wherein there was a macular hole with a visual acuity of 6/60. Post-operative 1 month, the patient improved to 6/9. In case of vascular disorder, it helps us in assessment of the retinal thickness. It helps us in quantifying the patterns of the EME. There's an OCT classification for diabetic macular edema, deciding treatment protocol in DME, quantification of cystoid macular edema in venous occlusion, monitoring response to treatment in diabetic macular edema and RVO, and prognosticating indicator as in the ELM integrity and all. In diabetic macular edema, OCT classification is as a spongy diffuse thickening, a cystoid type of a macular edema, serous retinal detachment without a posterior hilar traction, a posterior hilar traction without a tractional retinal detachment, or a posterior hilar traction with the tractional retinal detachment. The prognosticating indicator, as has been already talked about by my previous speaker, the integrity of the inner and the outer retinal layers are very, very important. In this case, as you can see, there is complete loss of the interdigital septate. It shows that the disease is quite chronic. And there is loss of the outer retinal layer. The ellipsoid zone and the external limiting membrane is completely lost. So this patient probably will not improve much in vision and would require a multiple number of injections. It helps in following up the patients also, as in this case of a BRVO, which was a 55-year-old female with diabetic and hypertensive. After 3 injections of anti-VEGF, the vision improves to 6/6. So it helps us to follow up our cases as well as show our patients the progression of the disease. This was a 62-year-old female, a central retinal vein occlusion. In spite of 6 injections of anti-VEGF, still there is persistent macular edema. There's waxing and weaning of the macular edema in between. So again, it helps us in follow-up and explaining the prognosis to the patient. In case of central serous retinopathy, it tells us about the nature and extent of the SRF, if there is presence of PED, follow-up of the patient, response to treatment, any complications that arise either in a chronic CSR, where there may be foveal atrophy, or in case of a long-standing CSR, sometimes you find a CNVM. In case to differentiate between an acute and a chronic CSR, to prognosticating aid also. So these are different types of CSR where you see a serous detachment in the first case, then associated with the PED, then with fibrinous exudate in the central macula. But this was a long-standing case of CSR where there is already a foveal atrophy. OCT proved the same with showing foveal thinning and gross enlargement of the choroidal capillaries. In case of choroidal neovascularization, is a very, very important tool for prognosticating the disease, knowing the lesion type, location, extent, comparing it with FA and ICG, to know if there is a subretinal fluid, intraretinal or sub-RPE fluid. As we all know, intraretinal fluid are the worst and it should be treated in each visit. Subretinal fluid can be tolerated to some extent, and sub-RPE fluid usually wax and wane. It tells about the type of PD, whether it's a serous PD or a hemorrhagic PD, and the response to the anti-VEGF treatment. In case of idiopathic polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy, it tells us whether it's a hemorrhagic, or in this case, there's a large PD with a double hump sign along with hemorrhages adjoining, which tells us that the patient needs a treatment. In case of dry AMD, it tells us about the extent of the disease, monitoring the disease progression, staging and prognosis. In the first case, you can see there is the exudative materials are free of the macula, so the patient will have a very good vision. Whereas in this case, the exudative materials are banged on the central posterior of the macula, so this patient definitely will have lesser amount of vision. In trauma, it helps us to tell us the choroidal rupture, whether it's passing through the center of the macula or sparing the macula. RD, obviously, it can show. In case of a BRAO or CRAO, there is inner retinal layer thickening and hyperreflectivity. As Dr. Rao has correctly pointed out, later in the disease process, there is thinning of the inner retinal layer. So this helps us in quantifying how much of thinning can be seen in the later part. In case of myopia, due to less contrast in the posterior pole, it sometimes becomes very difficult to differentiate a CNVM, a ERM, or a macular hole. So with OCT, you can very well delineate all this. Now, this is a case of a CNVM and this of a macular hole where we were unable to locate it with our 78T. In case of parafoveal telangiectasia, with a shin in the surrounding the macula and pigmentation, you can see the typical hyperreflective layer cystic spaces bang on the macular area. In case of Valsalva retinopathy, it tells us that the blood is just beneath the ILM. Therefore, a prick or the laser will dislodge the blood and then the patient improves in his vision. Optic disc pit, it tells us now there is a pit over here with retinoschisis and fluid and foveal detachment. It also helps us in surgical referral. Supposing in this patient, probably while doing a 78D, we might not have been able to pinpoint this BMT, but with OCT, it becomes quite clear we can refer this patient early. So to conclude, OCT is a game changer and the standard of care for detecting, monitoring, and classifying retinal diseases. For planning the intervention, it's the fastest non-invasive method. It is a good tool for educating patients, giving them knowledge to better understand their condition and increase patient confidence, and for timely referral. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanghamitra. So as we heard from Dr. Rao that this is giving us a in vivo micro retinal structure details correlating with various diseases can not only help us in making the patient understand their disease process, but also it will help us in quantifying the disease, in staging it, and also helps us in prognosticating it. So we'll now go to the last talk of the session by Dr. Deepak Agarwal, who would be highlighting on OCT angiography and how whether it is better or not as good as fluorescent angiography.
A very good evening to everyone. At this outset, I would like to thank Dr. Nanda sir, Dr. Sanghamitra for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this instruction course. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Yeah.
Over these decades, fluorescein angiography has been the mode of choice to visualize the vasculature of the retina and choroid. However, with the advent of OCT angio, it has created a new buzz amongst all the ophthalmologists because it is a non-invasive imaging technique. It is based on the principle of diffractive interferometry, wherein multiple these scans are taken at the same. I don't know, slide is not. multiple B scans are taken at the same section of the retina, and the software then compiles the image to give the image of a blood vessel. So as you can see here, that the only moving structure here is the RBC, and a multiple B scan images are aligned by the software over here, and then the image of the vessel is taken along with the two-dimensional end face image. So in one
Dr. Deepak,
particular, yeah,
Dr. Deepak, can I interfere?
Yeah.
Your face appears to be scanned by OCT. So could you switch off your background
okay.
and make it none? Open your yeah. No, don't end the show. Just go down, and there you see the video thing. Open the stop. Open the video. Click on the video.
Top video. Okay.
On the bottom, you have a mute switch and a video switch.
No, besides your your picture, you have three dot icons. You can go there and you can click none.
Oh, it's not there.
No, in your picture. When you click on your picture on the right top and side, you see three dots.
Yeah, my picture is not coming actually here.
Okay. Let him carry on, sir.
Okay, fine. Please carry on.
So basically, in one scan, we get a clear view from the crystal clear view from the vitreous cavity to the choriocapillaries. The A scan rate is around 1 lakh A scans per second, and the axial resolution is around 2.6 millimeters. So what the scan does is, it divides it into 4 layers: the superficial capillary plexus, the deep capillary plexus, the outer retina, and the choriocapillary. So important here is that the outer retina is basically the region which is supposed to be avascular, and any hyperreflectivity in this particular area would suggest that there is a type 1 type of a choroidal neovascular membrane. So these are the images section: the superficial vascular plexus along with the end face picture, the deep vascular plexus, the outer retina, the choriocapillary. Important part of this is that we can find out which layer is better, is much involved. As in fluorescein angiography, only the superficial capillary plexus is seen and the deep capillary plexus is not seen. As you can see here, this is a patient of a BRVO, and we can see that the involvement in the deep capillary plexus is much more. And this suggests that the prognosis of this particular patient may not be as good as we would have thought to be. Besides this, the peripapillary region can also, in glaucoma patients, the optic nerve head can also be scanned, and 4 sections of the optic nerve head is seen: the vitreous top, the radial peripapillary capillaries, the optic nerve head, and at the choroidal level. So in pre-perimetric glaucoma, we have found that there is a loss of the radial peripapillary capillary. So one of the most important advantages of Octa is that it is non-invasive, and therefore the complication of anaphylaxis and reaction is not there. Being a swept source OCT, also the scanning light is invisible, and compared to the other OCTs, the fixation of the patient is much better. So the other differences from fluorescein angiography is that fluorescein angiography, usually the field of view is much wider, and we can see the lesions in the periphery much more better. Whereas in Octa, the field of view is limited to 12 by 12 millimeter, and getting the scans from the periphery sometimes may be difficult if the patient's cooperation is not very good. Fluorescein angiography is invasive, and this is non-invasive. Fluorescein angiography is 2-dimensional, and this is 3-dimensional. And like I mentioned, that the deep capillary plexus and the other layers can be seen much better with the Octa. So the diseases where it has been used is in macular telangiectasia, and in very early macular telangiectasia also we can pick up the lesion. As you can see here, this is grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and grade 4. And we can see the capillary rarefaction and dilatation very clearly in the deep capillary plexus. In cases of diabetic retinopathy also, the vascular lesions can be seen very clearly. This is a case of a mild NPDR, and in most of this case, we would have avoided a fluorescein angiography. However, OCTA being non-invasive, it was done, and we can see that the FAZ here is distorted, which means that this patient has some element of macular ischemia, and therefore, the prognosis of this particular patient may not be very good and will require more frequent follow-ups. This is another patient with a non-center involving diabetic macular edema, and we can see increased perifoveal intercapillary spaces very clearly in both the superficial and the deep capillary plexus. This is a center involving macular edema, and one can see the FAZ is slightly enlarged over here with microaneurysm. However, when compared to fluorescein angiography, the detection of microaneurysms on OCTA may be a bit less because of two reasons. The blood flow in the microaneurysm may be slow or it may not be patent, and the increased display of the surrounding vasculature in OCTA makes it difficult to appreciate the contrast. So you can see here that this is a case of a cystic cystoid macular edema, which is seen as a very dark space with round borders over here. And if you see capillary non-perfusion areas, they are slightly less dark, they are slightly gray and are surrounded by the vessel border. Segmentation at the proper level will help us differentiate between IRMA and a new vascular front. So this is at the level of the superficial capillary plexus, and you can see there is an abnormal vascular network, and this is an IRMA. However, when we look at the vitreous phase, at the vitreous section, we can see that there is a front of new vessels. And this is a new vascularization of the disc and new vascularization elsewhere, which is very well seen if we do the proper segmentation. In cases of vascular occlusion also, OCTA helps us to look at the capillary telangiectasia, collateral vessels, microaneurysm, and also the level at which the lesion is there. That is the superficial capillary plexus or the deep capillary plexus, whichever is involved. So over here, we can see that there is also involvement of the deep capillary plexus, which is much more when we compare it to the superficial capillary plexus. And therefore, the prognosis in this particular vascular occlusion may not be very good. In ARMD also, it is very importantly, it has shown to differentiate between type 1 and type 2 CNVM, especially in the diagnosis of very early type 1 CNVM, CNVMs involved with chronic CSCR and geographic atrophy. So this was the patient of a CSCR, and over time, there was a lesion in the OCT, a small lesion, a small fibrotic PED, which was seen here. And you can see here that in the outer retina, there is no hyperreflectivity. Whereas in the level of the choriocapillaries, you can see a hyperreflective membrane. So this suggests that this is a type 1 CNVM, which probably would have been missed on a fluorescein angiography because of a subtle leakage. Besides this, following anti-VEGF treatment also, one can actually see the response. We can see that the whole vascular complex here is actually reduced. So quantitatively, we can assess the regression of the membrane. Whereas on fluorescein angiography, because of the leakage, the actual border of the membrane may not be seen very properly, and it may be difficult to assess whether the membrane is regressing or not. In IPCV also, the detection of the polyp is seen very well. You can see a hyporeflective area in the area of the choriocapillaries along with the branching vascular network inside. So again here, this was a case of a chronic CSCR, and we could detect choroidal neovascular membrane. In cases of uveitis, however, Octa shows all its weaknesses because of its inability to detect leakage, but it implements fluorescein angiography when it comes to differentiating outer retinal inflammatory material from inflammatory CNVM. So this was a case of a posterior uveitis, which was treated with steroid. However, patient presented with metamorphopsia, and we saw a small lesion here in the outer retina, and the corresponding Octa here in the outer retina showed a very small membrane, and you can see the red color coding of the vasculature here. However, after 2 weeks, you can see that there was an increase in size of the membrane, which is very well seen here along with the color coding here. So this was finally taken up for anti-VEGF treatment. In other inherited disorders also, we can see this loss of the RP, right? The RP, the outer retina, and the choriocapillaries very well, as is seen here in this particular section. So to conclude, overall, Octa has proven to be valuable for diagnosing a variety of retinal disorders and monitoring therapeutic response, with findings that may complement or exceed fluorescein angiography imaging in some cases. It is therefore likely that future software and hardware updates will increase the field of view of Octa and resolve susceptibility to motion artifacts, making Octa a formidable challenger to fluorescein angiography. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak. I do not know why Shivani was upset about you. She kept on buzzing to done your talk. You explained very nicely about how we avoid fluorescein angiography in most of the situations and going for a non-invasive angiography through OCT. Could we know about conditions where you would say that OCT would not be of use and you have to go in for FFA? What conditions mandate that you must go in for FFA, not OCTA?
Definitely, sir. Whenever we have a chronic central serous retinopathy and we are planning lasers in them, definitely a fluorescein angiography has to be done. Besides differentiating a chronic CSCR from a uveitis, also definitely FA will have a role, because we know that in CSCR there will be early leakage, and in choroiditis there will be early hypo and early hypo with late hyper. So definitely when we have to differentiate between CSCR and uveitis, or for that matter, when we have to diagnose a posterior uveitis or a retinitis, fluorescein angiography is a must. Secondly, in cases of IPCV also, there are chances of it being missed on Octa, especially if it's a polyp. And these cases definitely would need a fluorescein angiography along with the ICG. However, for detection of CNVM or the branching vascular membranes, Octa is very useful. And in between anti-VEGF treatment, definitely it is very difficult to keep on repeating angiography, and to see the response to therapy. Octa helps a lot.
So I can just add up,
Yeah.
like in a DME case where now there are many papers saying that the deeper layers are much more important than the superficial layer in quantifying the ischemia. Therefore, the OCT cannot help in that, and the angio-OCT does segmentation, does help. As pointed out by Dr. Deepak, that IPCVs in a slow flowing, when the IPCV there's a less amount of blood flowing through it, you cannot just make it out by Octa. And yeah, it's definitely in those cases of in vascular lesions, vasculitis, where you need the peripheral, anything that you need a peripheral visualization, Octa is not at all helpful, because till now we don't have a peripheral angio-OCT.
Yes. And to take the peripheral pictures, it is sometimes very tedious if the patient is not cooperating.
Yes, beyond the posterior pole, but it becomes very difficult.
Because now they have incorporated a different software in the in the Okta, where the patient can fixate, and we can take up definitely up to the equator. The images can be taken, provided the fixation of
But
the
that's
patient.
very hazy, actually.
I think because as of now, we have a scanning speed of 1 lakh per second. There are newer machines which are coming up whose scanning speeds are more than 2.5 lakhs to 4 lakhs. So in those cases, probably the eye movement should not cause too much of distortion, and we can get images much more clearer, especially in angio-OCT. Dr. Sasmita, I have a question about a progression of analyzing the progression from the basis of OCT. When you do a progression analysis from basis of OCT, in the nerve fiber layer, what difference from the previous thickness makes you say that it is progressed? And also in the macula, in the analysis of the central macula, what is the progression figure to say that yes, it has progressed?
So basically, there are different machines which say different, and they analyze the different things. But RNFL analysis is the important analysis in OCT. So in progression, you say you need to see how much RNFL thinning is there in a patient in a follow-up scan. You need to have a baseline
What is the
scan.
figure?
So in normal age, usually it is 0.5 microns. The loss is there per year. And if it is more than 5 micron or 10 microns, then you can say that there is some kind of pathology going on, or there is some advancement. Even in macular thinning, like in spectralis, we don't have, we have just event analysis. So we have a baseline scan, and the patient comes for the next visit or 2-3 visits. You just have to see how much macular thinning is there from the previous scan. And if the macular thinning is 5 microns or 7 microns thinning is there, still you have to be alert, and maybe there is kind of progression on all. Other machines like Cirrus HD-OCT and all, they do a statistical analysis. They have a trend analysis also. So they have a regression progression analysis where they color coding, and they tell you that there is a progression and all. But in our spectralis, we have to do with the follow-up baseline scan only. On the basis of that, we see how much RNFL thinning is there in the next visit, or how much macular thinning is there in the next visit. So that is how we have to see the progression. But it is not advantageous in advanced glaucoma cases. In early glaucoma, yeah, you can see the progression.
Frequently you will see. How frequently you will ask the patient to come and assess the nerve fiber layer?
So basically, OCT we are doing for the pre-perimetric in the early glaucoma cases. So yearly follow-up is enough, I feel. And if the patient has a high IOP or risk factors are very high, then you can tell him to come for 6 months. Otherwise, yearly once is fine.
For assessment of RNFL.
Yes, sir.
That is what you are telling, no?
Yes, sir.
So, Dr. Deepak, I would like to ask one thing, because I do not have any exposure on OCTA, because I have that, but I'll ask how actually almost all the retina patients you advise OCTA or commonly, or what you do in your clinic?
Definitely, sir, not all the retina patients, but in diabetic retinopathy, definitely now, since we have seen that even if the patient is having mild NPDR with a vision of 6/6, and we have picked up macular ischemia in the form of an enlarged FAZ in these patients in the deep capillary plexus. So I think in diabetic retinopathy patients, we should do, if we have Okta, we should do it in all patients as a baseline to assess so that we could know the prognosis, and we in the subsequent visits also we would get to know how the disease is progressing. So the macular status without the injection of a dye, we can very well see it on Octa. So definitely for diabetic retinopathy, I would do it in all my diabetic patients, even if it is a mild NPDR in the first visit, to know the baseline, how it is, and then follow up accordingly.
Okay. How will you,
Pardon?
as far as the OCT is concerned,
Yes.
actually, how you will say whether it is a must tool now or it may be what?
Yeah, I would say
Additional tool for the routine.
yeah, definitely. I would say it is not. It when compared to FA, definitely it cannot be replaced currently because of its limitation in diagnosing uveitis. If we have a patient of uveitis, it is very, I mean, except for detecting uveitic CNVM, for a uveitis patient, we will have to do a angiography. For CSCR, we would have to do it. We would have to do a fluorescein angiography. I would say that since it is non-invasive, and if the institute we can have it, it is a good adjunct instrument to have, because
Okay.
it would definitely, in today's scenario where we have to be non-invasive and lot of litigations are there, reducing on the number of fluorescein angiographies would definitely be helpful. That is my take.
Okay.
It is not
So we have
that it is a
5 minutes left. So we can accommodate one more question.
Yeah, I would ask Dr. Rao, like in a OCT, when would you, while following up your patients, as you don't do angio OCT, if you're doing only OCT, so how would you follow up your patients of CNVM, and when would you think, no, that's it, I don't need to inject more?
Still, I believe in actually clinical diagnosis only, because and the patient's visual acuity clinical diagnosis, still that is mostly I'll take into consideration that. And in fact, the imaging ways, I do not know. My mindset is still it's not in favor of imaging dye or dye based on the images, but still I take OCT images regularly whenever a patient comes, whatever the conventional OCT we have, not the. So there, if the response to the treatment is by the patients actually considering the visual acuity or this is not very favorable, then in that case, I think this is anyway further treatment may not be effective. That is what actually I decide.
Do you see certain OCT pictures where you say, no, that's it?
Pardon?
Do you find any OCT pictures to say, no, I should stop the treatment now? What are your OCT criteria to stop your treatment?
OCT criteria mainly, see the thing is, suppose there is not much of fluid is present in this one, what in CNVM patients, subretinal or the intraretinal fluid is not there. Even though subretinal fluid is present, if the intraretinal fluid is not there, then I think in that case I will observe the patient, because subretinal fluid now even it's not so detrimental as the intraretinal fluid. So based on the OCT.
Would you look at the chronicity of the tubular tubulation or cystic spaces that are there? Chronicity of the cysts and all?
Particularly in diabetic cases, actually, the outer retinal tubulations approach we are finding very minute or meticulously supposed seeing this outer retina, if the tubulations are we are finding, then that is the point one. We should not further inject the patient with any anti-VEGFs or any injective modalities of treatment.
Or else we can change our treatment modality.
Yes.
Yes, subretinal fluid up to 200 microns can be well tolerated. Beyond 200 microns, we should inject. And secondly, there are papers now they're saying that though they said that subretinal fluids are good, but they say a longer, if the subretinal fluid is staying in that place for a longer period of time, they cause some amount of RPE changes. So in the long run, again, there is chances of the RPE degeneration and loss of vision. So it's a very dicey situation.
Right. So we are coming to the end of our session today, and I see Dr. Meena, Dr. Kumar, Doctor Sir. Good evening, both of you. So we are.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, sir. So you have made Bombay back into action again.
Yes, Bombay is getting back to normal.
Madam Namaskar, Meena Madam. So we are vacating the platform for you. The platform is completely yours now. Thank you. I thank Dr. Sanghamitra, Dr. Sasmita, Dr. Deepak, and Dr. Nageswar for having explained different aspects of OCT and its role from anterior segment to posterior segment. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
sir.
Thank you.